Jiraiya, one of the 3 legendary sannin, named as such by Hanzo of the Salamander during the Second Shinobi World War. Jiraiya has not only been a fan favorite for people, but his presence in the story was something truly enjoyable, and his loss left an unfillable hole, regardless of how glorious that death was. While Jiraiya was of humble heart, many around him would note his successes and push him to be something more, but it was always his feelings of unworthiness that caused him to deny it. One might not realize this, but Jiraiya was a candidate for becoming Hokage. Minato was, in truth, not originally meant to replace Hiruzen. However, his feelings of worthlessness left him feeling as if he was disqualified for the position he venerated so much. After the death of Minato, Hiruzen would take the position back up, but it just makes me wonder what might have happened if Jiraiya had accepted the position.
Welcome to the Amagi! Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Also, we just released some brand new merch. If you'd like to show your support for the channel even further while at the same time repping stylish clothing, be sure to check that out as well. The store is linked below. YouTube's been unsubscribing users from channels lately, so if you're a fan of us, please do us a favor and double check to see if you're still subscribed. It only takes a second, and it helps us a ton here at Amagi. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video.
She fell into Naruto's arms and cried out with a loud voice. Hold me closer, you gutsiest of shinobi. Show me why you've become known far and wide as the god of shinobi. The sound of a quill across a Genko Yoshi paper could be heard as a candle flickered on the wick, playing its light upon the wall, the shadow of a man made to look 3 times larger than he was by the flame. The violent writing appeared to the shadow as an assault, the ink appearing as blood from a violent murder. Of course, it was hardly something as brutal as that, but one would not be able to tell such a thing from the face of Jiraiya. He gripped onto his silver hair, grayed with years of experience. Damn it, that's not right. Naruto would never respond with something as gauche as that. He's slicker. In anger, he ripped the paper in 2, and then further into 4 before crumpling it up and throwing it into the bin. He rubbed his temples. Writer's block was something every good novelist encountered at least once in their careers. From the greatest to the least, a writer's mind and passion could be stifled by anything. He was dedicating this novel to a good friend of his, one who he had heard was now dead, Nagato Uzumaki. The pain of that loss still echoed through his heart as he stepped to the window and looked outside towards the waning gibbous moon. Every time he looked to it, he could swear he saw the rings of Nagato's Rinnegan in it. That was particularly the reason he tended to avoid looking at the full moon. He did not wish to remember. He loved his students deeply, and while he would never forget who they were, he did not wish to remember their deaths. Having a messenger sent to him, he had kept himself composed well, even cracking off a joke, much to the messenger's horror. But once he was alone, Jiraiya wept. He wept openly, sobbing loudly. In anger, he had shred the original rough draft of the latest installment of Icha Icha. It was then that he felt a change of pace was needed and began to write a novel about a young shinobi he had named after inspiration struck in the middle of a ramen shop. He decided to name it The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. It was a novel about a ninja who had been in war and witnessed the cruelty of the shinobi world and wished to change it, wished to end the cycle of hatred that plagued the world. Little did Jiraiya know that he was attempting to write a prophecy, one that none could be sure at this time would come true. As he pondered the next steps, he sought inspiration, some muse that would set his heart aflame. Normally for such a thing, he would stop by the bathhouse, but that wasn't really an option for him now, as this novel was not in his usual genre. He began to wonder if he should just go to bed. Surely a good night's rest would unblock his brain and get his writing juices pumping again. It was then that he heard a knock at the door. Making his way out to it, he opened it up. Who could it be, he wondered. No professional killer would knock at the door. He slid open the screen to be met with the mask of an Anbu member. They are that stupid, he shouted as he jumped back. More than one member of the Anbu appeared. Sage art, he shouted out as he prepared hand signs. Suddenly, he was stopped by a familiar gravelly voice. Jiraiya, calm down. It's only me. He stopped, the horizontal slits of his pupils turning towards the source of the voice. He found Hiruzen. Nice to drop in unannounced, Hiruzen-sensei. You're buying me a new window frame. Hiruzen stopped and looked around at the damage. May I come in, he asked. Jiraiya motioned around. Might as well, everyone else is. Hiruzen ignored the sarcasm in Jiraiya's tone and stepped into his home. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, I just couldn't get away any earlier. Jiraiya, having dropped out of sage mode, asked what was wrong as he made his way into the kitchen. Hiruzen found a place to sit and began to speak. I believe I'm in trouble. A voice called from the kitchen. Oh, what happened? Hiruzen looked up from the ground. I'm being ousted. The writing's on the walls. My time as Hokage has come to an end. Jiraiya would call out from the kitchen. Got some tea and sushi. You and the kill squad want some? Hiruzen didn't really care to eat anything right now. The stress was eating away the lining of his stomach anyway, and whatever Jiraiya was cooking would likely finish him off. But he rarely got to see his student anymore, and what he was about to ask was important and deeply personal. Yes, I would love some. Jiraiya returned with a pot of tea, a set of glasses, and a plate of sushi. He set it down on the table between them. He poured the tea into the glasses as Hiruzen inspected the sushi, his face showing utter horror at what he was going to have to choke down. On second thought, I'm still full from supper. He instead took the cup of tea. Holding it in both hands, Hiruzen sniffed the wafting aroma and smiled, blowing the steam from the top. My time as Hokage has come to an end. I cannot remain as Hokage. If I try, the people may overthrow me. Jiraiya responded simply with, okay. Hiruzen looked up from his tea. I'm looking for a replacement. Jiraiya shrugged. You're the first person I've seen in the last 3 months, and you're the last shinobi I've seen since the war. Hiruzen sipped his tea. No, Jiraiya. I'm here for you. Jiraiya seemed as of yet still clueless as to what was happening, and his face showed confusion mixed with skepticism. What are you getting at, old man? Hiruzen sat his tea down and looked straight into Jiraiya's eyes with all the fire he could muster. You will replace me as the 4th Hokage. Jiraiya stared on for a moment before breaking down into a laugh that brought tears to his eyes. He stopped only for a moment to see Hiruzen was not amused. Jiraiya began to laugh even harder as he realized that Hiruzen was being serious. Jiraiya, as Hokage? Get real. He can hardly run his own team, let alone an entire village. Hiruzen-sensei, you've come to the wrong house. I'm not a leader, I'm a writer. By the by, have you seen my newest novel? It's considered as an Iwa Times bestseller. Hiruzen scoffed. You waste your talents writing these smut novels. Jiraiya gasped not once, but twice. Smut novels? These are my life's work. Everything I've learned about women in my many years of study are recorded in these books. Hiruzen sipped his tea again. As I said, you're wasting your talents. Jiraiya would scoff and proceed to entertain the idea for a moment, taking it seriously. Alright, let's say you do need a replacement. Why me? Why not Tsunade or Orochimaru? Orochimaru was always smarter than me anyway. I'm sure he would do real well as Hokage. Hiruzen looked down towards the floor for a moment, as if overcome with a sense of shame. Orochimaru is not who he used to be. A subtle darkness has fallen over him. Ha! Jiraiya exclaimed. Even I could have told you that. He offered to murder 3 orphans a few years back just because they were orphans. Hiruzen looked back. That is why I can't choose him. As much as I want him as a replacement, I can't choose him. Not in good conscience. Jiraiya would shrug it off. Tsunade then. She's the daughter of Hashirama Senju, one of your mentors. Surely she's fit for the job. You would be surprised, Hiruzen said. She's fallen into a drunken stupor. The biggest decision she makes in a day is whether to bet on black or red. Always bet on black, Jiraiya said. Hiruzen ignored this statement. She's rarely in the village anymore. Went her way a long time ago. Jiraiya rolled his head back on his shoulders and groaned. Why me? Why not someone else? Minato Namikaze, Fugaku Uchiha, anyone. Why does it have to be me? Hiruzen pulled his hat down to conceal his face. You're the only one I can trust. You're the one with the greatest experience. Are there other options? Of course, but the best option I can think of would be you. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Minato's a good choice. He's talented and wise. Choose him. It was then that something strange occurred. Normally, when faced with this much resistance, Hiruzen would just give in and leave Jiraiya alone. But this time, he didn't. He continued to debate about Jiraiya's worthiness for the job, going so far as to even insist, no, demand, that Jiraiya take the job. Leaving the hermit no choice but to accept, Hiruzen stood. Pack your things. Tomorrow you're going to come to the village. Jiraiya just sat there as Hiruzen began to leave. You know I'll fail, right? Hiruzen stood in the doorway, not even turning back as the moonlight gave his silhouette a gently glowing outline. I know you'll try your hardest, like you always do. He then stepped out into the night. Jiraiya sat there for a moment and thought deeply about it. Suddenly he got up and ran to the door. You're still paying for my window! Jiraiya came to town. While there, he was greeted by Minato and his wife Kushina. Every time he saw them together, he couldn't help but smile. It was like watching 2 puppies rubbing noses every time they were together. Jiraiya almost envied them, but realized what they had he could never have. After all, being happy just wasn't his fate. He was a loner, and while he might have passing fancies and make glances at, the marriage life was not for him. Only one woman did he ever see himself actually marrying, and she wasn't gonna have it. Last time he seriously approached her, she broke both of his arms, a quarter of his ribs, and even ruptured a few organs. He was in the hospital for so long. He didn't want to have to deal with that again, so he gave up on love officially and merely remained in it for the thrills. However, he was pleased to hear that Kushina was pregnant. Jiraiya thought it was the sweetest thing. He saw Minato as the closest thing to a son he would ever have, besides all the possibilities from times past, and trust me, there were plenty of children out there who were possibly his. But in an official sense, Minato was the only one he could recognize as such. In fact, he remembered when Minato was a child himself once upon a time, and now he was about to have a child of his very own. Jiraiya couldn't help but take a little pride in that, knowing that the man Minato grew into he was partly responsible for. However, he had tried not to take too much credit. Minato was just as much a teacher to him as Jiraiya had been for Minato, and the fact that Jiraiya could now use the Rasengan so well was proof of that. We're going to name him Naruto. Jiraiya almost wanted to scream. Why that name? Minato and Kushina looked to each other. Remember when you sent us the first 5 chapters of your rough draft? We were so inspired by your main character and his ideals that we wanted to pass it on to our son. Jiraiya was speechless. He was touched in a way, but at the same time it was stupid as hell. I named the character after a fish cake in my ramen. Are you sure you want to go with that? Minato and Kushina nodded. It's no worse than Minato's choice, Kushina said. Jiraiya, in his infinite curiosity, smiled. What did he want to name him? Kushina giggled. He wanted to name him Menma. Jiraiya and Kushina both laughed. They laughed not with Minato, but at him. And they wanted him to know it too, as they pointed in his direction and threw their heads back. Minato was a good sport though. Once they were done laughing at his expense, he and Kushina approached him about something important. We want you to be his godfather. Jiraiya's eyes darted left and right, and his smile had yet to fade. Me? He said, pointing at himself. They nodded. Yeah? Jiraiya sighed. You guys are full of great ideas today, he said, his sentence dripping in sarcasm. Minato continued. You're partly to credit for the man I've become today. If he can just become half the person that you are one day, I'll be content. Jiraiya was tired of listening to people puff him up. He wasn't that great. He was a failure. The deaths of Nagato, Konan, and Yahiko told him that much. Still, he accepted. They gave him no other choice. The day eventually came that he was to be coronated. Hiruzen stepped down the day before and Jiraiya was ready to fill the position. He was there in full kabuki makeup. He was going to put on one heck of a show. He would wear this makeup as the sculptor attempted to capture his likeness for the Hokage monument. Are you sure you want to add that in, sir? The monument won't be in color. Nobody'll know you're wearing it. Jiraiya would merely pose dramatically. They'll know, even if I have to paint the monument myself. Jiraiya settled into his office and watched over the village. The job was as boring as he had thought it would be, but what was worse was that there was a lot more paperwork to do, and that was Jiraiya's arch nemesis. The last time he filled in a report for Konoha, they ran out of pencils, and he was forced to use a crayon, something Tsunade still wouldn't let him live down. That being said, he didn't have a lot of time on his hands, and whenever he did finish with the paperwork, he just didn't feel like writing. He instead would just go out on the town or enjoy the sunset with a couple bottles of sake in his beach chair that he had camped out on top of his head on the monument. He just loved watching the sun go down and the lights come on. It truly was spectacular, and one of the few things that he enjoyed about becoming Hokage. How Hiruzen ever talked me into this, I'll never know, he said as he looked over the village. On one particular day, though, he had a lot on his mind. Not only was there work to be done, but war with Kumo was on the horizon, the last embers of the Third Shinobi World War. But beyond that, tonight was a special night. Tonight was the night he'd become a godfather. He had offered an old stronghold just outside the village proper for Kushina to use. He knew that giving birth to a child was rough, and that difficulty was squared if you were a Jinchuriki. Hiruzen and Biwako were there, hoping to aid in any way that they could. But honestly, there was a chill in the air. A bone-chilling frost, like death was breathing down the neck of the village. He couldn't pin it, but something was wrong, and as if his thoughts had invited calamity upon the village, he bore witness to the arrival of the Nine-Tails. Jiraiya tried to assess the situation as he stood there, watching it tear the ground up, shredding buildings. The cries of panicked villagers could be heard echoing up the rock face. He ran straight towards the fray. If Minato failed to keep the beast sealed, then that means... He stopped this train of thought before it could proceed any further. He continued to race forward, summoning Fukasaku and Shima to his side. Together, the toads fused to Jiraiya's shoulder and began to utilize Sage Mode along with Jiraiya, using their immobile bodies to gather energy to fuel not only themselves but Jiraiya. Feeling the surge of power, Jiraiya sped up, quickly making it to the village center where the rest of the shinobi were fighting the Nine-Tails. "Lord Hokage!" one of the shinobi called out below. Jiraiya dropped down to speak with him. "Report," he would demand. The shinobi would state that the Nine-Tails had somehow escaped and was summoned to the village center. Jiraiya would question that last part, but realized that it had appeared out of nowhere, which meant that they were likely correct. It had been summoned. That meant that this wasn't just an accident, it was an attack. Jiraiya would look to the shinobi. Where's Minato? The shinobi would state that no sign of him was reported. Jiraiya would ask about the Uchiha, to which the shinobi would state that Danzo Shimura had ordered them to guard the border in case of an attack from outside the village. Jiraiya was befuddled. Why would he do that? They would be of more use to us here, trying to help us defend the beast. The shinobi would state that Danzo did not trust the Uchiha and that the appearance of the Sharingan's reflection within the eye of the Ninetales had caused him to doubt their loyalty. At this point, they would need to find a way to push the Ninetales out. As it stood, the Ninetales was making its way deeper into the village, closer to the most heavily populated areas and refugee centers. They needed to deter it. Jiraiya commanded all the shinobi who weren't directly in combat to follow his lead. He began to move down the streets, utilizing Sage Art Goemon to set the streets ablaze, as well as any buildings on either side. Much to his delight, the Ninetales would see the flames and pull back, not willing to burn itself to get to the center of the village. Other shinobi did the same, setting a fair portion of the village on fire as a barrier between the tailed beast and its victims. They had left the Ninetales nowhere to go but back, and it was now Jiraiya's job to push it there. Rushing forward, the Ninetales went to smear him on the ground, only to be caught off guard with his usage of Needle Jizo. The pointed hairs buried themselves in the Ninetales' paw, drawing a roar of pain that echoed across the entire village, shattering windows of the buildings within a 200-meter radius. Jiraiya would try to keep it off balance with another Sage Art Goemon, which would knock the beast off balance. Jiraiya would then summon Gamabunta, dropping him on top of the Ninetales. It pushed him off and rose to its feet. "Push it out of the village, Gamabunta," Jiraiya called up to the toad. Gamabunta pulled his blade and began to strike out at the Ninetales. The fury of the beast rose. It attempted to end everything, the village, Gamabunta, Jiraiya, everyone, with a single massive tailed beast bomb. Standing atop Gamabunta, Jiraiya would utilize a Sage Art Big Ball Rasengan and plow it right into the beast's face, pushing it back further. It became even more feral. As it prepared another bomb, Jiraiya knew he couldn't stop it from using that technique, and that he just needed to be prepared for the worst. Suddenly, Minato appeared and grabbed onto the Ninetales, using the Flying Raijin technique. Minato would teleport it away. Jiraiya would look around. Where had it gone? He witnessed a bright light over the nearby mountains. He, along with many others, set off after that light, hoping to find what produced it. From building to building, he jumped until he finally reached the edge of the village proper. Ascending the mountain, he could only imagine what had happened. Minato was alive, that much was for sure. But Kushina and Naruto, where were they? Were they safe? He knew that Minato wouldn't leave either of them to die, so the only person who would know for sure would be Minato. Either they were already dead or they were still alive. He needed to ask Minato that. But as he got to the top of the mountain, he looked and saw a rather large barrier comprised of adamantine chains. That was his answer. Kushina was still alive. Her impressive chakra reserves had kept her going, even without Kurama. But he knew that she couldn't last much longer, which is why it was paramount that he got down there as soon as he could to aid with the sealing it away. As he got to the barrier, he pounded on it, hoping that they might hear him and let him in. Instead, he witnessed the two of them being pierced by the claw of Kurama. They held tight together, not letting it harm the child, which he could also confirm was in the barrier with them. Time passed, and it almost seemed as if they were talking. Suddenly, Jiraiya witnessed the Shinigami of the Reaper Death Seal. He saw it seal the beast into the child before consuming Minato's soul. As he fell, so did Kushina, her wounds and chakra loss having caused the barrier to give out. He rushed in and grabbed onto the two, holding them in his arms as he sensed for any chakra. For Minato, it was too late. He knew that much. But a part of him had hoped they might be able to save Kushina, but the gaping wound in her chest told him that it was not possible. It drove him to tears to see the ones he had seen as a son and daughter dead in his arms, but his cries were cut short by smaller, more helpless cries. Turning his watery eyes over, he saw the infant. Standing, he made his way closer to it. It possessed the blonde hair of Minato, and the 8 trigram seal on its belly like Kushina once had. This was their son. This was Naruto. The babe was crying out. Recognizing that the poor thing was bare, on this, the coldest of October nights, Jiraiya removed his Hokage's haori and swaddled the babe in it, gently lifting it as if he were afraid he might hurt it with his strength. Pulling it closer, he kissed its head and pulled it into his own warm embrace to chase off the bitter chills the child must be suffering from. "I have you. I will never let you go," he whispered into the ear of the infant. "I will protect you, Naruto." The other shinobi near stood by him, unsure what to do, knelt with the Hokage, awaiting orders. He would look to them. "Go to the stronghold, see what's become of Lord Third and his wife, and if you can find any clues, and have shinobi gather Minato and Kushina's remains. They will be honored." A day of mourning would be called as the villagers spent time lamenting the dead and burying them, rebuilding. Jiraiya himself would perform the funerals of Minato and Kushina, having them cremated and placed into the same urn, as he believed that even in death that they should stay together. He would lead the procession out to the forest where he would carry the urn. He would tell of stories of Minato and Kushina, every time they made him proud, every time they made him laugh. He told people that they were to celebrate their lives and see them off with a smile, but such a thing was impossible to do when even Jiraiya himself could not smile. Stepping out into the river with the urn, he would open it. Bidding them goodbye, he would pour the contents into the water below and let them drift away. It was as if his own son had died. He fought just to stand. Keeping himself from crying was out of the question, and to see their Hokage cry allowed the entire village to empathize with their leader, feeling how he understood their loss and was feeling it too. On that day, the entire village became just as Hashirama and Tobirama envisioned it, a single clan. In the face of a tragedy, instead of fighting, the entire village had banded together as a single family, sure to help each other stand again and continue walking together, hand in hand. But troubles did not cease. Jiraiya, whether he wanted to or not, had become a father. And despite the fact that there were plenty of nurses and handmaidens to do the job, he still felt it was important to personally bond with Naruto. The child had lost his family, and he would not let him go without one. Jiraiya had been named Naruto's godfather, and because he was named such, he would fulfill the duties of one. But besides Naruto, there were still a lot of things happening. The war between Konoha and Kumo was still burning, and people were dying. In the span of little over 2.5 years, half a generation of shinobi were wiped out. A good number through the attack of the Nine-Tails, a terrorist attack to which they still didn't know the culprit, and the loss of life in the war. They had moved the Uchiha to another area of the village, the outskirts, according to Danzo's plan. Jiraiya hated that, but he went along with it, basically because he knew that Danzo was more experienced than he at running the village. Little did he know that this would lead to ill will between the Uchiha and Konoha as a whole. Besides that, when the war finally did end, Kumo sent an ambassador to the village to broker peace. However, after attempting to kidnap Hinata Hyuga, the heiress of the Hyuga clan, Hiyashi Hyuga was forced to murder the ambassador. This would lead to tensions rising once more. They demanded the head of Hiyashi Hyuga as reparations for the death of their shinobi. Jiraiya was against it from the start. He knew that Kumo had attacked them first and didn't feel that they should bow down and let them take it. Regardless, the Hyuga, in particular Hisashi Hyuga, had offered to pay the price of their own free will in an effort to protect the peace forged. A true sign of solidarity between Konoha and the Hyuga. True loyalty that would never be forgotten, even if Jiraiya had disagreed with it in its entirety. The job of Hokage was only getting harder and harder from this point on, as even more darkness sat on the horizon. He truly lamented that Hiruzen had chosen him to be the next Hokage. He was not competent for this job and was sure to fail. Besides the mounting pressure on the political stage, he was having to raise Naruto, who by this time was already 3 years old, and was walking, talking, and causing mischief. Whatever would he do with him? I think this is actually a good stopping place for today. We'll save some story for later. I hope you enjoyed this what if. Be sure to tell me in the comments below what your favorite part is. Feel free to throw out some ideas on how you think things would change. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas.
Did you enjoy our video? Well, then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.